But I did go up the next day to pick grapes, and while I was having the déjeuner, this is in Savigny-les-Beaunes, I worked for a winery by the name of Pernon-Vergelès, and I'm sitting having lunch, and the vigneron, this old man with a beret, his name was Marius Delarche, comes in. Il y a une lettre pour Erika. There's a letter for Erica. And sure enough, it was a letter from Achim. He says, I remember, he wrote it in English, French, and one line of German at the end. He writes, I live in my car in Europe. You can be with me whenever you want. But nothing in life is free, although some liars say so. And liars was spelled Lyers. So you need to leave a copy of your stories on my computer. And then he wrote something in German. It said, Schöne Träume bei Tag und Nacht wünsche ich dir. And I didn't understand a word of that. Not one word. He was concerned that I wouldn't get the letter, so he wrote it twice, the exact same letter, and sent it to the same address. I don't know how he got the address back then. He knew I was picking grapes, and I told him a place called Pernon-Vergelès, and he remembered that, and it got to me. So after I picked grapes, I went up to where he was studying at the Université de Metz, and we were engaged 15 days later. He's a drummer. He was a drummer in a band called Wackendorf Spezial. And he had a gig that following weekend and asked me to join him. By the way, if you hear that, that's called the travel lift. That means it's bringing a big boat on land from one place to another, most likely in or out of the water. So, my first time in Germany, we drove all night from the north of France, Metz, up to Hamburg, Germany, where he had this gig at the Zazara Heimatfest. And it was my first time in Germany, and the first thing I noticed was everybody was wearing cowboy hats and spurs and jeans and plaid shirts, and they were all doing the shit-kicking two-step inside a beer tent. I didn't know they did things like that in Germany. My husband's band had his brother on the bass, a friend named Amin, who was one guitarist, the other friend Yogi on the other guitar, and lead singer's name was Katya, who I'm still dear friends with. My husband knew that I could sing, and he told everybody he'd like to invite me up onto the stage to sing for everybody. So he invited me up, and right in front of everybody, his brother, who I'll just call D for now, because he's a very private guy. D says, what kind of songs do you know? I said, well, I know everything you guys possibly could play, I know. He says, okay, how about Country Roads by John Denver? I said, yeah, everybody knows that song, right? So I'm singing it with them, almost heaven, West Virginia, etc. Take me home, country roads. Then we get to the bridge. I hear the na 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 na, they call me radio. To this day, I always voluntarily now draw a blank on that bridge. And I just sat there and said blah, 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 blah. So that hardly endeared me to the band. Then my hubby said, look guys, you gotta give her another chance. That song was obviously not one she knows by heart. So he says, well, how about Johnny Be Good? Well, everybody knows Go Johnny Go, right? Do you know all the words to Johnny Be Good? So that was a second disaster. And I can sing hours and hours and hours and hours of songs, but I will never learn the words to Johnny Be Good. So those two songs will stick in my mind as being the nightmare songs that I wasn't able to sing on that one day with Wackendorf. But I was slowly falling in love. On the 3rd of October, 1990, we went to Berlin. The wall had just fallen, and it was now German reunification. And I felt like I was unifying myself with the man for my future. I wasn't sure how that would look. I wrote poetry about what it felt like to be in Germany, to be in this Nazi land, being Jewish myself, it feeling somehow exciting, defiant, exotic. And I noticed how deeply close I felt to aspects of the German culture that I had not felt in France or in America or elsewhere for that matter. I don't know how much of it was being married, being in love. I hadn't gotten married yet. But being in love, and how much of it was the reality. It just so happened that that year, the Spiegel magazine, which is a famous magazine, came out with an issue called Jews and Germans. And I couldn't speak any German at all, but I sat there and painstakingly, with a dictionary, went through the entire heft, the entire issue, and tried to understand some of the things they said in that issue. And one thing I took away from it was the real difference between the Germans and the Jewish people is humor. It sounded about right to me. It still does today. I wrote a poem called Reunification on the 3rd of October, 1990. I don't remember it by heart, but it was something like this. It scares me, Mom said, over 3,000 miles of telephone wire. Oh, Mom, don't be scared, I replied, between thrusts. I thought that was pretty funny. So, the same year that I was engaged and getting married was the year that my sister was also getting married. But she wanted a kind of a bigger, fancier wedding and had, catered with a band and all of her friends there. So we decided that we would fly back for her engagement party and then get married ourselves, and the honeymoon would be an opportunity for him to meet my mom. Achim had already met my father at that point. He came to Paris when we were living there in 1991. And that worked out pretty well. My mom wasn't thrilled about me marrying somebody she had never met, but we did invite them. We gave them 3 weeks heads up to come to the wedding. It wasn't a good time of their life to do that, to come. And at that time of my life, I guess I wasn't bothered by that. And now that I have 3 children of my own, the idea that they would get married to somebody without me meeting that person, I can't believe I did that to my parents. It just feels bad now. I've apologized, but it just shows that we do change with time, don't we? I've definitely changed. I don't think I had a lot of respect for my mom when I grew up. To me, she was loud and fat and Jewish, and that wasn't something I was particularly proud of. I also had no Jewish education. My father was anti-fanatic, as he put it. Didn't really believe in organized religion, although he believed in spirituality. And that's why when I was 10, I accepted Jesus into my heart, thanks to a dear friend of mine from school whose mother was a minister, and she exuded a lot of love and joy, and I found her inspirational. And she took me to Forest Home Christian Conference Camp, where I became what they called a completed Jew and accepted Jesus as my personal Savior. And I held the Bible in my hands, and when my mom picked me up from camp when I was 10, she said, "So you're a completed Jew? What does that make me? Incomplete?" And my sisters bugged me quite a bit about it, sort of teased me, asked me questions like, "So let me understand this right. If Charles Manson is sitting on the electric chair, and just before they pull the trigger, he says, 'Jesus, forgive my sins,' he'll go to heaven, while these Aborigines or peoples living in indigenous situations who have never heard of Jesus, but they're really good people, I'll go to hell?" And I thought about that. I thought about a lot of different things, and I went back to that camp the year after, and I asked a lot of questions to my counselors, and they said, "Erica, we think it's wonderful that you're asking all these questions, but it's all going to come down to your faith. So either you're going to take the leap of faith or not." And that was it. I felt like I had bit into the tree of knowledge's apple, and I was thrown out of Eden. But I still remember to this day the beauty of how it feels to not question and just feel the glory of God inside you and the glory and the miracle of life. And I'd like to keep that miracle inside me. I'd like to keep some of that joy and that gratitude. But I'm not in a place in my life, and haven't been for many years, where I feel that there's some sort of an unmoved mover, some sort of a omniscient, omnipresent being that watches over me and tips the scales this way and that to teach me or test me or this or that. And yet, life really is a miracle, and it really is quite beautiful, even with its difficulties. And there is no story without conflict, and I have plenty of conflict in my life, but I also have plenty of joy and abundance, and I hope you do too. I hope you've enjoyed my first video podcast, and that my stories have been either entertaining or soothing or just good for you to listen to. I don't know how often I'll be making these updates, but I'd like to believe that we can now have a long-standing relationship. Feel free to send any questions to me, and thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.